Hey everyone, thank you. Welcome to this week's Tax Rep Network podcast. I'm Eric Green, and I finally have this guest on after months of negotiating schedules and everything else. So joining me, someone very special, is Janet McHard. Janet is a certified fraud examiner and CPA in the states of New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Janet also is a master analyst in financial forensics, specializing in fraud risk management, and is certified in financial forensics by the AICPA. She's also a card-carrying private investigator. Janet founded the McHard Firm in 2009. Prior to that, she was a senior manager at an accounting firm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Janet has performed forensic and investigative accounting in cases on behalf of clients, including governmental entities, nonprofit organizations, closely held companies. Examples include state government agencies, Native American pueblos and tribal governments, school districts, public and private healthcare organizations, construction firms, auto dealerships, law firms, professional associations, artists, royalty matters. We got to talk about that, by the way, and retail organizations, just to name a few. Janet has overseen the successful reconstruction of decades of business records to determine ownership percentages and perform detailed analysis of cost billings in multi-million-dollar building projects. Janet has specialized interview training and has secured written confessions, which have led to successful outcomes in white-collar cases, including securing voluntary repayment of losses. Ms. McHard has testified as an expert witness in federal and state courts, as well as administrative procedures, settlement arbitrations, and grand jury proceedings. She's a contributing author of the Fraud Casebook, Lessons from the Bad Side of Business. She has co-authored articles for Fraud Magazine, the publication of the ACFE. She's taught instructional webinars for continuing professional education, CPE on behalf of the ACFE, and anti-fraud training webinars on behalf of state government. As a faculty member of the ACFE, which we will get into, by the way, Janet has traveled internationally teaching to fraud prevention investigation specialists. Janet has been a speaker at the AGA's National Conference of Fraud and Internal Control and AGA's webcast series. She's also a speaker at the American Bar Association's Tax Fraud and Tax Controversy Forum, which is actually how we met. Janet also has also taught in-house courses to Fortune 100 companies and worked with the audit committee of a Fortune 50 company to establish internal goals for their fraud prevention program. She holds an MBA from UNM's Robert O. Anderson Graduate School of Management, in addition to a Bachelor of Arts from the University of New Mexico. She's involved in several charitable boards and is recently inducted into the UNM Anderson School of Management Hall of Fame. Well, Janet, welcome to the program, finally.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be on. We've been trying to get this scheduled for months and months, and my schedule has been chaotic, and I suspect yours has been too.
It's been nuts. And so what prompted this? You and I, for those listening, so Jen and I have spoken on panels together on eggshell audits and criminal investigations for the ABA Tax Controversy Forum in Las Vegas every December. What prompted this is, so Janet, to catch you up, I have been, I did a number of talks and with the National Society of Accountants.
Great.
And they publish every year the average fee for a 1040, which is just going down. It has gone down every single year since 2012. Much of that is because of self-filing.
Right.
When you take away everyone's itemized deductions, most people, just go get TurboTax or something like that because it's a W-2 and you can't deduct, you don't have enough to get over the standard, whatever.
Right. You're not itemizing. It's not a complicated return. So I'll just do it myself. I'm not going to pay somebody several $100s to do it.
Exactly. And so I've been beating the drum. My thing is IRS representation. If you're an EA or a CPA, there's so many people in trouble. So many people need help. However, let's say you don't like, as I've said, if the thought of calling the IRS makes you wet yourself, then, there are other things you can do to elevate your practice. If you like investments and whatnot, insurance, become a certified financial planner.
Right.
And take your practice. You have a relationship. Take the practice into an advisory type role. If you like accounting, why not go get your CFE? Why not go get trained to do forensic analysis, forensic accounting? And I mentioned that I know somebody who teaches in the ACFEs program. It's a 4-day program. I think it's Monday through Thursday, and it's the 4
Usually, yeah.
parts.
Mhm.
You take the course. At the end of the day, you take the exam. So,
Right.
part 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time you leave on Thursday, as long as you've got the the accounting classes that you needed,
Right.
and your check clears, you're
Okay, I think you're oversimplifying it a little, Eric, but
I'm not oversimplifying.
just a touch
Yeah.
oversimplifying. But the idea of the ACFE prep course, and I think we're jumping the gun on the things we wanted to talk about, but I teach that as one of the courses for the ACFE. And the idea was that the ACFE noticed years ago, before they created this, that people would sign up to take the test, and theoretically they would self-study for it. They would eventually sit down and take it online. But so many people would sign up to take it and then never do the coursework and never take the course. And so what they created was this 4-day review course, the idea being that you would have done some home review before you get there. You show up Monday morning, you find a place to sit, and each day you have instruction, and each evening you test. And the idea is that at the end of 4 days, you will have passed all 4 sections. And then so long as you meet all of the experience requirements, educational requirements, and so on, then you become a CFE after that really concentrated course. And it really is concentrated. It's a intense course for 4 days. The stress level in that room is really kind of amazing when people are cramming information into their heads for 9 hours and then doing a 90-minute test. It's something to behold, but it's remarkably successful. Yep. And it's a way to create success in our busy schedules, because for 4 days, you don't have anything else on your calendar. It's all you got. So it really does work.
Yep. So, and again, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Can you explain what is the CFE for those people who are not familiar with this? What is the CFE?
So CFE is a certified fraud examiner, and the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners was founded by Joseph T. Wells, who was a CPA who was also an FBI agent. And he realized through his work as an FBI agent 2 things. One, law enforcement agents frequently don't know anything at all about accounting and don't know how to investigate financial crimes of whatever ilk, whatever kind of financial crimes, whether they're tax crimes or whatever else. And the other thing he realized is that businesses didn't have a very good way of training their employees to prevent fraud. So when he retired, I think it was retired from the FBI, he founded with a couple of his friends, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. It's been around now for about 27 years, I think. Maybe it's 30 by now, I don't remember. But essentially a CFE is what you get if you take a accountant, preferably a CPA, but an accountant, a detective, and a lawyer, and you take those 3 professions, you put it in a blender and you go whir. It's not just accounting, it's not just law enforcement, and it's not just law, but you have to know all 3. And so that's what it is. And I should give a disclosure right now. I am not a staff member of the ACFE. I am on their faculty, which is an outside position. So what I'm telling everybody today is my understanding of it as an outsider. But if anybody has any questions about it, you're totally welcome to call me, and I will get you in touch with the right person at the ACFE to get your question answered. So these are just my own thoughts, not ACFE thoughts.
Right. No. And I will put your contact information in the description below on the podcast. So if anyone does want to reach out to you, whether to get you involved in a case or whether to just talk to you about the ACFE or anything else, that will be there. So now the ACFE has a program, and I remember in your bio, listening to the AICPA financial forensics certification go whizzing by.
So there's a couple of different certifications out there. The ACFE is different from the AICPA certification in financial forensics in a couple of ways. The ACFE is really about fraud examination. So it really is based in the idea of, or around the idea of investigating occupational fraud. So this is workplace crimes, embezzlements, thefts. It's very much, ACFE is very much about occupational fraud. The AICPA course, or the AICPA certification, first off, is for CPAs only. at the ACFE, it doesn't matter what your background is, as long as you have the right number of years of service, whether you've ever even taken an accounting class, doesn't matter. It's whether you can pass the test and whether you can show you've investigated white collar crimes. So at the ACFE, they've set up the point system, and I think we have a different place we're going to talk about the point system. But if you can accrue enough points through the point system through either experience or education, you can become a CFE. For the AICPA CFF, Certified in Financial Forensics, you must be a CPA. And Certified in Financial Forensics isn't just white collar crime. It's all kinds of forensics. And let's just define forensic accounting really quickly. Forensic accounting is a pretty big umbrella, and it's any kind of accounting done with the potential for the purposes of litigation. That's all it is. So it might be a business valuation, for example. If there's a partnership dissolution and the business has to be valued as part of that dissolution, that would be under the umbrella of forensic accounting, but it's not a fraud examination. Now, let's say that a partnership is dissolving and one partner is accusing the other of stealing the money. Well, now we're into fraud examination territory. But the AICPA designation is a much broader designation and includes, yes, it includes fraud examination, but it also includes things like damage calculation and valuation theory.
Okay. So you know what, let's just talk about the CFE for a moment.
Sure.
Because the truth is, I love that 4-day course. I mean, I love the idea of it, right? I mean, it's intensive, you focus, and I would expect that it would be very successful because the people that are going to go do that and pay for that generally are pretty determined. They're not there to hang out and kill some time.
It's true. It's very different, you know, because I teach a lot of CPE and I teach also continuing legal education. And there's a very real difference between somebody who is simply trying to get their CPE hours for the year and somebody who has to go get this designation, particularly when their employer has sent them and it's a condition of their employment, because we see that a lot at that CFE course. Your goals for this year, employee, are to pass the CFE, and we'll pay for you to go to the course, but you have to pass it. So there's an enormous amount of pressure on people to pay attention, to actually participate, and to pass the test. So yeah, there's a lot of stress in it, and it's very funny because there's one of the vice presidents at the ACFE, John Gill is his name, is one of the primary instructors of this course, and he always teaches the very first block and like introduces everybody. And the very first thing he does is everybody take a deep breath. And he takes people through a breathing exercise to start because they're so stressed out that they're not even breathing. They're just doing these little bitty baby shallow breaths. And so he does a deep breathing exercise before he even introduces anyone.
Oh, no, it's intense. So you mentioned accounting and experience. So what are the requirements for somebody listening to this who's listened to me too much and has now listened to you and said, you know what, I want to go get my CFE? What are the requirements?
So there's a point system, and you can go online to acfe.com, and then there's a place to click for CFE qualifications. And when you get there, there's a place to, you can say, do I qualify? And it'll take you into a point system. And essentially the way it works is that you get points for education and designations and experience. If you are a 20-year law enforcement officer and you've worked in white collar crime that whole 20 years, you get 40 points for that. You have to have 50 points to sit for the exam. So it's essentially 2 points per year for experience in white collar crime investigation, auditing, accounting, internal audit, any of that kind of stuff. You get 40 points for having a bachelor's degree in a topic which might be applicable. So whether that's criminology or accounting, it's 40 points. There's another, I think, 5 points for a master's degree in any of those areas. If you're a lawyer who's been doing a lot of white collar criminal defense over the years, you will also get points for that. And essentially the experience, the education, all has to somehow tie into fraud examination, either as an investigator, as a lawyer, as an accountant or auditor, all of those things. It's actually, if you're listening to this podcast today, you are already gaining those points, and you probably already have all of those points. It's been a long time since I've run into anyone professionally who didn't qualify under the point system that ACFE has.
Right, right. So let's assume that people are sitting at home or in their car, whatever, they're listening to this and, oh my God, I love this. I love this idea. That's what I want to do. I want to be Janet. And for all that entails,
Oh God.
I know if I had somebody come up to me at the IRS Rep conference and said a couple of years ago, it was the last year we were at Foxwoods, and he came up, he said, I want to be you. And I'm like, I'm so sorry.
It's actually very funny. I take it as a compliment when people say things
course.
like that to me. And I have actually had people who attended my classes who say that. And they don't really say, I want to be you. They say, I want to practice like yours. And I have had the joy, and to me, it really is a joy, of watching people who come up to me and say that then blossom into their own small business fraud prevention or fraud examination consulting. Tiffany Couch at Acuity Forensics in Vancouver, Washington, just outside of Portland, is one who attended a course that I taught in August of 2008, and then has her own firm doing exactly what I do. Her firm looks very much like mine. She went out on her own before I did. Bernadette Peters, who is in, I think, Atlanta, did another one where she focuses on small businesses and fraud prevention and tax compliance in small businesses. These are women who approached me earlier in their career and said, how do I do this? And it's just been a joy for me to watch them do that. I just love seeing that happen.
So what I wanted to ask you is, what does practice in this area look like? And what I've told people, and I am not a CFE, is look, initially the people that I know that go out on their own, you're not getting Madoff. Those cases are not going to call, but lots of people getting divorced need someone to do forensic work. Lots of people in bankruptcy trustees, sometimes they can't afford a big firm to come in and do it, but someone's got to go and try to help them trace the assets. So, one, what does your practice look like? But, for those people who do get into this, I've been urging them to just understand there's plenty of money in the small stuff. All right. And what happens, and I will tell you this from my litigation partners, if you don't have the credential, you could be the greatest forensic, whatever, the guru of the world. If you don't have the credentials, they will not use you. They won't put you in front of the government. They won't put you on the stand.
You're right.
And it's unfortunately, that's just the way that it is.
It's true.
Because you've got to become the court, the other side, the jury, the government, whoever is on the other side of the table has to be willing to acknowledge, okay, we are willing to listen to this person's opinion. They are an expert, and without the credentials, it's unless you're like, yes, I was a supervisory special agent for the IRS and retired after 30 years. That would probably carry as much weight. Sure.
It's interesting that you say that, because I want to interject really briefly. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
The initials after my name are part of the reason that I'm successful. My mother teases me that I have too many initials after my name and I have this huge long resume, but it's for the reason that you just articulated. When I get seated as a witness in federal court, as soon as I go through my designations, that's kind of the end of establishing my expertise. I don't have to go any further. There is an assumption, because I've passed all these tests, because I have this experience, because I have these designations, that I really do have the expertise, assuming that the topic is something around forensic accounting or fraud examination. But one thing that I think is a bit of a fallacy, and I think that the practitioners in this area need to pay attention to it. 30 years experience as a supervising agent in IRS gives that person expertise in IRS process and taxes, but doesn't make them a general all-around forensic accountant.
Right.
And so I find that the single best thing that somebody could do to get a practice like mine and to have a job description like mine is to understand what accounting looks like in lots of arenas. So not just what does it look like as I'm preparing 1040s, but what does accounting look like in a closely held business, in an LLC? What does it look like to actually reconcile the bank accounts of a grant-funded nonprofit? What does that look like? And I think the more a forensic accountant understands all the places that accounting can show up, the better that forensic accountant can be in looking at a set of documents or a set of circumstances and understanding the implications of it. Let me give you a case in point. We frequently get cases because in our practice, the McHard Firm, we work both sides of the aisle. We do workplace investigations. We refer those investigations for prosecution to law enforcement agencies, and we call those victim-sided cases. But we also do we balance our caseload, and we do also a lot of criminal defense work. So we take a lot of cases that are already indicted, and we're assisting the criminal defense counsel in coming to some resolution in that case, whatever that resolution might be. I am stunned how often in our criminal defense work, we find a prosecutor who says, the owner of this business was embezzling because look, there's a check here that's not a paycheck to the owner. And I say, what's the corporate form? And the prosecutor says, what's a corporate form? Good. And I say, well, if this is a sole proprietorship, if this is an LLC, if this is a partnership, those are probably draws. And no, you're not going to withhold taxes out of those. And a prosecutor who has only ever worked for a paycheck from the government has no concept of what an owner draw is. No idea whatsoever.
Right.
And sadly, I've found forensic accountants who work for the government who also don't understand this because they only understand accounting sort of as it was taught in school and how they've personally experienced it. And so the broader the experience you have, I think the better expert you can be because you can spot things like that maybe have a legitimate explanation.
Oh, well, on the defense side, it is also interesting how frequently the government gets tunnel vision.
Oh, absolutely.
And they focus on one thing. And we've had cases where the criminal case went away because the government focused on one thing. And so I had somebody who, police officer, also collects guns, personally. And he sells those guns, I think it's through gunbroker.com or one of those.
One of the online brokers.
Yeah. And they don't 1099 you because they're just brokering. So he has the deposits going into his bank account, gets audited. IRS says, aha, unreported income. They refer it to criminal. Criminal's like, hey, we know, dealing in guns, the money. And I said, well, what he's doing is legal. And they were personal guns. So I'm like, well, that would be a capital asset, which means he has basis. And I don't know, and I'm telling this to special agents who I know. I said, I don't know how much you know about guns, which they get annoyed, but because they all carry guns. I'm like, I don't know how much you know about guns, but that Glock 19 that you're carrying, which is what they carry, it was bought by the government, gets a better deal, but you could buy it for $550. You'll sell it for $500. They don't tend to go up unless you have George Washington's, revolutionary gun. So they end up going out getting a civil auditor who says, yeah, they're right. So their $200,000 case became a $12,000 with penalty and interest over 3 years because of some bookkeeping errors. It is always amazing. What IRS CI I think is very good at is following the money and interviewing. They have very good interview skills when they confront taxpayers. That's about, they're not even tax experts. That's really about it. But in your practice, I mean, when we read your bio, you have all kinds of clients, government entities, small businesses, Fortune 50 companies that you've gone and done training for. So busy, I know you're busy because I know you, but for the people listening, what does your practice look like? Because it's much different than a 1040 practice.
Oh, it's much different. And let me just tell you a little bit more about our practice, because our practice is very much set up as a boutique accounting firm, or some people might say a niche accounting firm. So we are licensed as a CPA firm. We are also licensed as a private investigations firm, which is unusual. Our managing partner is retired from San Diego Police Department, and in addition to doing white collar investigations and workplace investigations, also does police misconduct investigations. So very, very far outside the world of money, use of force and those kinds of things, investigative breakdowns in police stuff. So we have a really wide and varied practice, but what we don't do any audits. We provide no attest services whatsoever, and we don't prepare any taxes. I don't even prepare my own taxes. I'll admit that. I used to, then it got too complicated.
Neither do I.
LLC. I was like, not my expertise.
Right.
One of the most important things you can do if what you're trying to do is add a litigation expertise to your service line, one of the most important things you can do is understand what your expertise is in and stay in your lane. That's the most important thing you can do. Know what you do well and do that. What we do really well in our firm are reconstructions, whether it's for a tax purpose, like a Covell accounting. We do a lot of Covell accounting work. Or perhaps it's a reconstruction for other purposes. We've had them for insurance liability reasons in arson cases. We've done reconstructions in partnership dissolutions, a lot of them in probate cases. We do a lot of securities work. One of our partners has an expertise in securities law enforcement. That was her previous position, was doing forensic accounting for securities division. And then we do workplace investigations, and we do a lot of them. And whether that workplace investigation is an allegation of embezzlement, we certainly do that. We also do workplace investigations having nothing whatsoever to do with accounting, things like whistleblower protection, retaliation, civil rights violations. So we have a really wide and varied practice that doesn't look a single thing like an accounting firm. We are completely inverted. The traditional accounting firm is a pyramid with lots of staff people and a handful of seniors and a couple of managers and a partner. So it's a very pyramid sort of structure. We're an inverted pyramid. We have 3 partners, 1 analyst, and 1 administrative person. We are by design small. There are forensic firms which are much larger than ours doing forensic accounting, but we have a long-term goal of never getting more than 10 employees. That's not what we want, because we partners want to do the work. We love doing the work. We're all 3 incredibly curious women. And I think curiosity is maybe the single best thing you can bring to the table as a forensic accountant, to look at a financial statement or a bank statement or a tax return and go, that seems odd, is curiosity at work, but it's also possibly a clue. And so chasing down those loose ends is one of my favorite things to do in whatever kind of case it is, whether it's a construction case or a grant fraud or whatever it is. So I love chasing down those loose ends. And frankly, I love people. So I also love interviewing, and I love figuring out where the additional information is, whether it's in records or whether it's in somebody's brain that I need to pull out through an interview.
Yep. No. So when you and I met, we were on that eggshell audit panel. Yeah. And yeah, so for those people who are listening who don't know what an eggshell audit is, it's a civil IRS exam, but where we are aware of the potential tax fraud. And so it's called an eggshell audit because you're walking on eggshells. The goal is to try to handle the audit without tipping your hat as to the fraud to the auditor. And honestly, that's just going to come down to, in my mind, I'd love to say I'm brilliant and I know all kinds of, a lot of times it's where is the fraud?
Well, and so the eggshell audit is really fascinating to me from a lot of perspectives. And one is, how do you negotiate that very narrow, very fragile pathway around fully complying with the audit as required under the IRS code and our professional ethics? Yours as an attorney, mine is a CPA, or the EAs who are listening have their own set of professional ethics. So how do you negotiate that path so that you are complying with the audit, and at the same time, you as a professional aren't violating your own professional ethics by protecting some piece of information where the fraud exists, knowing full well that the IRS thinks there's something going on too, and they're trying to get to what you don't want them to get to. It's like a chess game, I think, but it has really high stakes.
So I wanted to, we don't have a ton of time, but I wanted to ask you, do you have any really good crazy cases?
Okay, so my favorite case, you asked me to think about this, and my favorite case, and I love telling stories, so I could do this all day, but I don't think your listeners want to listen to it all day.
Oh, I'm doing a full 8-hour workshop on January 7th of a case that started criminal, ended up going back to civil audit. They get divorced. She has an innocent spouse. And the truth is, I love telling stories. It's the story aspect that makes the tax stuff so interesting.
I agree. I totally agree. The stories are, it's what makes this work fun. And I tell people I have the best job on the planet, because I totally think I do. For me anyway, as curious as I've been my entire life, being paid to be curious is maybe my favorite thing ever. So one of my favorite stories, I was working with a client who felt like their CFO was, and they didn't know exactly what was going on, but they approached us because they felt like the CFO had sort of taken over and was hiding information from the owner. There's kind of a backstory to this. The owner of the company was, we later found out, in the early stages of Alzheimer's. And so it was actually fairly easy to hide this stuff from him. But the CFO was clearly doing stuff that didn't make any sense, and they didn't know what, and they asked me to go in and figure this out. And so I actually went in and put him on paid admin leave. I wasn't their HR person, but nonetheless, they asked me to, I did. I said, guess what? You get to go play golf and you're going to get paid to do it, but you can't come into your office for a few weeks. He was not happy. While
the fraudsters usually aren't.
No, because the truism is that if the fraudster has to be in the business to keep hiding the fraud, and so by telling him to go away, we then had access to figure out what was going on. Well, we knew that there had been multi-$100,000. One was $450,000, one was $300,000 payouts to some C-level executives at this company. And when we went through their payroll, these payments weren't reflected in their payroll. And we walked in knowing that, but we didn't know where it was. And you'd think that'd be pretty easy to find, because you've got debits and you've got credits, and they should offset, right? They should offset, except he'd moved them through a bunch of different accounts. Finally, I came across this liability account that was called Liabilities Other. And frankly, any account that has the name miscellaneous, suspense, or other in it, I'm pulling a detail. So I pulled the detail of this other account, and sure enough, here's where this $700,000 in bonuses were. These were bonuses that were paid to individuals who were employees where no withholding had been made. They weren't paid through the payroll system. These payments never appeared on a W-2. They were never shown as income from a payroll perspective. And we found these, and I thought, aha, now I figured out what he's doing. Because if you think about this from an accounting perspective, the check goes out to the employee. The other side of that is decreasing a liability. And so this company had a liability account where they were slowly estimating liabilities and increasing this account. And then he was using that in at least 2 cases to pay these bonuses. So I asked to interview him, and for reasons that I completely do not understand, his attorney let him come in by himself to be interviewed.
Okay.
And I'm interviewing him, and the way I set up the interviews, and I've done this my entire career, is that I try to have two people in the interview, one person asking the questions and one person taking the notes.
Yeah.
And so I was interviewing him, I was doing the questioning, and I finally got to the point of the interview where I pulled out my detail of the other liabilities other account, and I set it in front of him on the conference table, and I said, "Can you tell me what this is?" And he answered, and I quote, "That's where the bodies are buried."
Wow.
And I went, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "Oh, anytime I wanted to do something I didn't want anybody to see, that's where I put it." Just
Okay.
admitted it straight up.
Uh,
And it's the first time I'd ever had anyone actually put it that bluntly. It kind of fascinated me that he felt so secure in what he'd done that nothing was going to happen to him. And then after that, he sued for wrongful termination because he felt like his termination was inappropriate.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, uh, well, it always amazes me. Well, you know what? That is what makes this business interesting.
It is. You're absolutely right.
I have I had a crazy case. I've had a bunch of them, but one of them, the most interesting one, I think, is where at least because of what I do, I know the auditors. Not all of them, but I know many of them.
Mm-hmm.
And one in particular is extremely aggressive to her detriment.
Right.
And what happened is I had a new client come. They've been selected for audit. His CPA does not know this yet. He knows he got selected for audit. The CPA is traveling overseas. It's after tax season.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he doesn't know it yet, but I've been omitting. He said by mistake that it was a mistake in his spreadsheet, but every single year he happens to omit about $300,000 of receipts.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, right. Okay,
Mhm.
fine. And I said, send me the audit note. And he gets the audit notice, send the audit notice. And I noticed that I know who this is, very aggressive. And I said, where's the CPA? He's traveling. I said, what I would do is tell the CPA to send her that he's traveling. It'll be a number of weeks, and he'll have to set up an appointment when he gets back. I've had this with her before. And sure enough, she did exactly what we expected her to do. She then sends back saying, here are my proposed changes, which is just denying all of his deductions. If you don't call me within 10 days, I'm going to send this to billing and issue a notice of deficiency, right? Haha, I'm going to teach you, Mr. Taxpayer. So the client said, what do I do? I said, do nothing. Ignore it. CPA called now. He's in Ireland. I said, do nothing. Ignore it. Let her do this. Sure enough, she does. Month and a half later, we get a notice of deficiency. We file in tax court. What happens, for those of you listening, is if you file in tax court, the only thing they're going to look at is what you raise. So the issues we raised are she denied all the deductions, would not give us time to produce the information, got sent, when you have them into appeals, it goes to appeals. The appeals officer said, all right, Eric, what have you got? We send all the expenses up. There were some minor adjustments, done. They missed a $1.2 million tax fraud because she didn't insist on him sitting down and doing the interview, because the first question is going to be, is all income properly reported? First, what's your name? But after that, is all income properly reported on the return?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And either you're going to admit it, you're going to perjure yourself.
Right. Yeah.
What would have to happen is we wouldn't have been able to do it. I would have had to have him invoke the fifth.
Right.
Which is a pretty big flag.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing is, she just had to summons the bank records. It went right through the bank, like any good fraudster, right? Put it right through the bank. And so, that was the one reason that I thought maybe I believed his spreadsheet story, because how stupid do you have to be? Although actually I have another one where they are not from this country. They're from a country in Europe. And they clearly did not understand the fraud when it was first explained to them. So every Friday they would drive all around to the banks, cashing all the checks. They would then take all the cash and deposit it in the bank account. It's like, what are you doing? And they didn't report it. And I'm like, it went right through your bank account. So they had a falling out with one of their employees. They get picked for an audit. One item, gross receipts. I'm like, they know. The government knows. The lucky thing about them, they had all this rental real estate that was losing money. Because it was losing money, why would you put that in TurboTax? So they never reported it. So when we actually did the returns, they had all these losses from the real estate. And I could sit there straight face say, oh my God, did they screw up their return? They missed deductions, they missed the losses. And I showed them corrected amended returns. And the auditor clearly disappointed because he was certain he had a fraud case. I almost felt like he had CIA agents outside and he was like, no, never mind.
Yeah.
And,
one of the Covell cases I did was just like that, because they said, you've got this revenue, it's not going through your business operating account, you're putting it straight into your retirement account, your bookkeeper doesn't know about it, it's not reported on your taxes. But when I sat down and interviewed him, it turns out that something like 30% of his business expenses were going through his personal Amex, and he was never telling his bookkeeper about those either. So by the time we did the Covell reconstruction, he actually got refunds a couple of years. The IRS was not happy with me about that one. I actually not happy with him about that one. I don't think they ever knew I was in it because I was the Covell, but still.
We have a case now. It's the largest tax court case in Connecticut in at least the last 30 years. It's 10 million. And the government wants 10 million. We have 5 million of refunds. This is a guy who came to America and just did phenomenal. Hotels, motels, mini marts, and just kept building his empire.
Right.
But he and his buddy are doing their own QuickBooks.
Oh God.
And they have no controller, and they're giving it to their accountant, who's not a CPA or EA, who just takes the QuickBooks and does it. And so they get audited. The auditor's like, oh my God, it's like you owe us, like, again, $10 million.
Right. Yeah.
We had it all reconstructed. Dawn Brolin. I think you've met Dawn. Dawn brought in Dawn. She reconstructs it. We have 5.7 million of refunds. There were more, but those are the ones that were within the time that we could get the refund.
Yeah, within the statute.
We filed the refund. We were going to file the refund. We filed the refund claim. We're now in tax court fighting about their 10 million. It's just off the rails. I mean, it really is off the rails. So,
well, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the tunnel vision on the prosecution side. It is pretty common, and I don't know what the percentage is, but in the cases we see, a lot of our cases, if you take off the blinders, what you find is that the circumstantial evidence of intent that the prosecutor is using is offset by something on the other side. And when you get these transactions where neither the income nor the expenses are claimed, and it happens in kind of a haphazard manner, you almost have to go to the position where the taxpayer was simply, they were lost. They didn't know what they were doing. Things simply weren't getting booked right. And if the attorney, because that's not my role, that's the advocate's role, if the attorney can advocate that position sufficiently well, frequently prosecutors will back off of it, at least hopefully, if you can get them to take off their blinders. And that, my role as a forensic accounting, getting back to the purpose of the podcast, my role as a forensic accounting is to give the attorney the evidence that the attorney needs to go advocate those positions. I always feel like if I can give the attorney the factual information in the matter, whatever it is, the attorney then is in a better place to advocate for their client. And that's what my role always is to provide the factual information, because I'm not an attorney. I'm not an advocate.
Right. No, it's well put. So before I ask my last question, again, how can folks get a hold of you who are listening to this, who want to talk to you, whether it's about a case to bring you in, or it's even about the ACFE?
So if you can spell my last name, you can find me. It's Mac like McDonald's, hard like hard as a rock, or hard-headed like my mother says about me. So MC, capital HARD, there's only about 24 of us in the entire country. I'm the only Janet. So if you Google Janet McHard, you're going to come up with either my ACFE faculty profile, or you'll come up with our firm website at themchardfirm.com. And if you go to themchardfirm.com, you can download my V card that has my email address in it and my cell phone and all that stuff. Of course, in the middle of a pandemic, I'm on my cell phone most of the time. And I am delighted to chat with anyone anytime if they have questions. The easiest thing to do is to email me and get an appointment time because my calendar is so crazy. I am particularly passionate about mentoring people who are starting in this industry. So please feel free to reach out to me either via email or via LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn too, and I would love to chat with you on LinkedIn.
Right. No, absolutely. So last question. Where do you see the, you've heard what I think, but where do you see the accounting profession going in the next 5 years? And if one of our listener, I would just say, what advice would you give? If one of them cornered you at the movie theater and said, Janet, can I get 2 minutes? What would you suggest, given where everything is going, what is the best advice you can give me?
So one thing I think is very important is to be curious and keep learning. Especially those of us who are professionals, we have to keep learning about our business. We can't be static. We've got to keep learning. We've got to keep finding ways to educate ourselves. Nobody becomes an expert and then stays an expert. You become an expert and you keep becoming an expert. It's a process of continual education. And I don't mean just to satisfy the CPE hours. I mean to understand what's really going on. The move to electronic banking and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency has really changed the world of fraud examination. I have to keep learning about that stuff. And I completely agree with you, Eric, that the world for CPAs is changing. How it's changing or where it will end up, I don't exactly know. I have thought for a very long time that the CPA world ought to be bifurcated. When I went to school, the question was, are you going to be an auditor or are you going to go into tax? Auditor, tax, auditor, tax, auditor, tax. I actually think that they ought to split the designation so that there is a certification for tax accountants and a certification for financial accountants who may or may not also be auditors. And I also think that we are moving towards a more specialized world. It's not just an accountant who is an everything numbers person. It's a tax preparer who is a tax expert at multi-state taxes or state and local taxation or tax controversy or tax representation. It's a CPA who specializes in cost accounting. It's a CPA who specializes in GAAP prepared financials. The difference between somebody who is auditing an SEC client and somebody who is auditing somebody under the governmental auditing standards or GAGAS is vastly different. So I really think we're moving towards sub-specializations instead of an overarching specialization, which I really think means that as professionals, we need to figure out which part of our profession we love the most and then specialize in it.
To take that one step further before we wrap up, I've had Brent Robertson from Fathom on, they're a consulting firm in West Hartford, Connecticut. I've had Joe Woodard on, who's founded Scaling New Heights and is very involved with Intuit. I've had Walter Pagano, who you know very well, who's forensic accountant. Yeah, I love Walter. He because of his proximity, we use him a lot in our forensic cases. There's a very consistent message, which is, and Joe Woodard put this very interestingly, put it very succinctly. And what he talked about is the automation of bookkeeping. If you look at an Intuit conference, half the room is freaking out. They're going to take my income, they're going to take my business. And he and I had agreed, what if you could get all of the bookkeeping you have automated? What if you're Markham, their CIO was at our conference last year at New England conference and said, by this year, there will be no human being doing a 1040 anymore. It's all automated. What they were talking about is What that means is that former staff who would, on the audit, they put the stuff in the spreadsheet, that's gone.
Mhm.
What they need now are consultants. What they need people now to, that the consultants, the tax accountants, the tax auditors, the forensic, the financial auditors have got to elevate themselves and become higher end consultants, or they're going to be out of the business. The days of grinding it out it's all going to get automated away. So kind of the reason I wanted to have you on talk about the CFE is about this aspect of elevating your practice.
Right.
Forensics is one, IRS representation and getting involved in being a problem solver,
Mhm.
financial planning. And one thing you kind of touched on, and is also now a big part of the CPA, computer science and all of the technology around financials.
Computer analytics, data
Yep.
analytics is a huge part of our practice. Um, we're forensic accountants, we do reconstruction, but we frequently will end up with massive databases, and we're looking for a needle in a haystack in that data analysis pile to figure out where to investigate or who to interview for frauds. So you can't ignore that part of it either.
Yep.
I'm going to introduce one topic, which is probably going to be controversial to at least some people. I agree that we all have to be consultants, but you can't consult on something until you know it. So you cannot become a tax consultant until you truly understand the Internal Revenue Code, until you truly understand the forms, and you have to know what is right before you know what is wrong. And so when I have somebody come to me and say, they're in college and they say, I want to be a forensic accountant. How can I be a forensic accountant? I say, go spend 3 years being an auditor, then become a forensic accountant. You have to know what it looks like when it's right to know when it's wrong. And so I think the industry hasn't yet grappled with that. I don't know how we train consultants if we don't actually have them doing the data entry and understanding the double entry accounting and debits and credits. I'm horrified at the number of young accountants I see who don't know what the natural balance is of an asset account. They don't know the difference between a debit and a credit, and they can't use the concept of double entry accounting to go find the other side of the journal entry to figure out where the bodies are buried.
What's interesting is I think you have two problems. And to go along with that, because I don't think it's very controversial, and there are a lot of people talking about this from multiple sides. Simon Sinek, actually the
Mhm.
consultant about find your why, he hits on some of this too. You have two problems. One is you have firms, whether it's and this is before coronavirus, bottom line pressure, um, law firms, accounting firms, you name it. Nobody wants to bring in a newbie and spend the time training them up. Nobody wants to send them to attend conferences. Nobody,
Right.
if you think about when I became a partner, I had a network. I was bringing in
Right.
work. I had sort of worked my way up.
Mhm.
They're taking a view of that as a cost, not an investment. And so
Right.
one is you have the firms that don't want to deal with it.
Mhm.
Then you have on the other side, and I'm not bashing millennials. Simon Sinek gave a great talk on London Real about this. And it was actually under the idea of the increasing suicide rate. And he actually said, if you listen to the interview, he said, look, it's really going to get much worse. And here's why. You have children of a failed parenting strategy where they're told they're special, they can
Right.
do anything they want. And sometimes they get advanced in school and get A's, not because they deserve it, but because the parents henpecked the teacher to just whatever, just
Mhm.
get rid of them. Now they go out into a workforce where they don't want to coddle them. In
Right.
fact, it's actually going in the reverse. They're not interested in training you. The pressure is going to be on you to be curious, go do this yourself. And we hired somebody here at the firm, and we said, look, he wanted to do estate planning. You're not an estate planner, but you can be one. Here,
Mhm.
here are the books you're going to
Right.
spend your nights and weekends reading. Those books, when he up and quit because he couldn't handle it, those books were sitting on his shelf exactly where I'd left them. He never
Right.
touched them. He
Completely
never picked them
unopened.
up. He never even moved them. And so what Simon had mentioned in his talk was, it's like they're standing at the bottom of a mountain. They can see what they want. They can see the top of the mountain. What they don't see is the mountain. This long slog that career and life are. And I can tell you what should happen is companies, firms have to acknowledge what they're dealing with. And even though you say, well, it's not my problem, it is our problem. I'll tell you, we can't find associates. With all the people graduating from law school that can't find jobs, we can't find associates. They don't want to work overtime. They think that whatever's on this, I'm holding up a smartphone, no one can see me. That those are their friends. They don't understand networking. They have no interest in going to conferences. But then you have firms who have no interest in investing in them. And how does this end? I don't know, but I think not well.
I think that whether it's generational or technological, I think our work society is going through some growing pains. And I don't know how it's going to come out. I see a lot of outsourcing of lower level accounting positions to other countries. And those are jobs that could be used to train good forensic accountants, and yet they're getting outsourced. And like you, I see people who feel like they want the end game before they play the first few innings. You can't win a baseball game in the bottom of the ninth until you play the first 8 innings. And I think that that's something that many people are missing. And whether it's because our attention spans are reducing because of smartphone and technology, whether it's failed parenting strategies, or whether it's some other acceleration of our society that I am not competent to put my finger on, what I see is that there are at least some number of the younger generation in business who want the end game. Now, at the same time, I still see a lot of people who are a generation or two behind me in business who have the same drive and have the same motivation, but you really do have to look for them.
Well, and what I think is, I was never, and again, start quoting other people. Ed Milet, who is a motivational speaker, talks about your obsessions become your possessions, meaning to truly, you really need to want this. I actually spent the first few years of my career floating around getting laid off. I didn't want to be an accountant. I didn't want to be an accountant.
Okay, Eric, let me wait. Hang on. You don't know this about me. My undergraduate degree is in dance. Talk about a profession that's not going to pay a mortgage. I spent from high school until I was in my early 30s, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to be when I grew up. Right. Now, once I read an article by Joe Wells, it was an interview of Joseph T. Wells, where he was talking about the newly created ACFE, I realized that moment that was what I wanted to do. And then I had no problem walking up the mountain to get to base camp, because I'm not at the top, I'm only at base camp. But I had no trouble walking up the mountain once I knew what my goal was. I think a lot of it is finding that goal, because then I had no problem whatsoever studying every day at lunch to take my CFE exam. I had no problem whatsoever studying for the CPA exam, which I did in a casino because I love loud noises. I work better in loud, really energetic places.
I had no idea.
Oh yeah, no, you put me in a silent library and I am so distracted. I can't do anything. So I frequently am sitting here doing data entry with a football game on the television and playing music. That's just how I roll. But yeah, I didn't go through my 20s looking like a success. It wasn't until I was in my 30s and even 40s before I finally got my professional feet under me. And that's okay.
I found my career floundering, and because I really just didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do I'm an attorney that doesn't draft documents and doesn't litigate. My entire very weirdly, my entire practice is administrative.
Right.
Even my criminal cases. Now, I have former DOJ lawyers who will try the case if necessary. I mean, I have, Jeff will try the refund case. So in other words, I like to say I'll pick the fight, but they have to go fight it. Um, but, um, but I fell into this by mistake.
Right.
While I was a very sort of mediocre estate planner, I had a client that got into trouble.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden I liked that. That was interesting work. And then
Mhm.
then he referred somebody else. And then when that job didn't work out, and I did hook up with who would eventually be my partners at the time, who are both now retired, one is deceased. And I remember my wife saying, "You're going to another, job to job. What is different about this?" And it was hard to explain, but I'm like, I like this.
Right. You found your passion is what happened.
There's something that lights the fire.
Right.
And
Mhm.
all of a sudden I got very into this. And well, what
Mhm.
happens then? And what happens then? And I began, and you find that it's no longer work.
That's
I mean, don't get
exactly
me
it.
wrong, there are days when it's work,
Oh,
but
yeah.
but that whole thing about find something you love and never work a day in your life, it may not be exactly accurate, but it's actually pretty close.
Oh,
I generally enjoy what I do.
what I heard was do what you love and the money will follow. And I do truly believe that. Do what you love and the money will follow, because your passion for it will bring more of it your way. And you enjoy it so much, it's not drudgery. So, to your listeners who I know are in the tax world, many of them doing 940 prep and trying to figure out what to do with their practices, the fees for 940s go down. If what you love doing is finding the answer, asking the questions, turning over the rocks to see what's there, if you find yourself looking at your clients' records and going, I wonder what happened here. I wonder if I can go find the answer in another document. You're already in the mindset to be a CFE. Go take the test. You first have to sign up as an associate member. You can do that online, take the points calculation to see if you've got the points. And if you have any trouble with any of it, give me a call and I'll get you in touch with, they have mentors down in Austin to get you through the process. So I'm happy to put you in touch with the membership mentors down in at the ACFE headquarters in Austin. I personally think it's a really fabulous program. It's a great organization. I've been working with them now since 98, I think it is. I got my CFE in 99 and I've been on their faculty since 2003. They're my second family down there and they're just great people and the best customer service of any organization on the planet. You always get a live human being when you call down there. You never get a robocall. Never do you get a robo operator. So great people, and really look into it. It's a great way to expand your practice and it will make you better at whatever you're doing in the accounting world.
Agree. All right. Well, listen, Janet, thank you very much for doing this. You and I are going to put together a webinar. We got to figure out when we're going to do that.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think we'll do eggshell audits.
Let's do it. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, no, I think it will be. I think it'll be good. But all right, listen, thank you for doing this. Everyone, thank you for listening. I will put Janet's contact information in the description below so you can go ahead and get a hold of her. And we'll talk to you next week.
Everybody take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.